Hello and welcome to another episode of the 3C Group Money Matters podcast, a podcast for clients, colleagues, and community. We appreciate you joining us. I'm Alice Zalman from the 3C Group of Baird, and here alongside me today as team hosts are my colleagues, Dan Matthews and Lauren Snyder. Fellas, how are you this morning?
Doing great.
Doing great. Ready to ride.
Good. Sounds like it. Well, again, this podcast is a show that we hope helps educate, maybe inform, maybe entertain a little bit, but back up our team's mission to be a great teammate for clients, colleagues, and community. So appreciate you joining us for episode 2. We are so lucky this morning to be joined by one of our favorite Baird colleagues, Mike Antonelli. Mike is a market strategist with Baird Private Wealth Management. He's a Purdue University grad, which we'll certainly forgive him for. Mike, welcome. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm sitting in Bloomington right now, which I think that would consider Purdue's enemy territory. So I'm excited to be here. I've been in Indiana for a couple days. My friend Lauren and I, we might go see Caitlin Clark, hopefully. So I'm actually in a great mood, ready to talk about whatever's on your guys' mind right now.
Well, luckily, Caitlin's back. Hopefully, she can play again Friday night, and the Fever can shoot a little better than they did yesterday. It was pretty rough going for 3 quarters, but still see good things coming for him. So, in any case, for our listeners, again, Mike is a market strategist with Baird Private Wealth Management. He majored in history at Purdue, which fostered a lifelong passion for him in looking back at history's impact on current and future events. He's been with Baird since 2007, writes the Bull and Baird blog, which is incredibly insightful. We encourage you to check that out, and provides other commentary and education available on bairdwealth.com, including weekly commentary with Ross Mayfield, All That Matters. So bairdwealth.com. As we've mentioned in previous episodes, one of our goals to help us get to know our guest on each episode is to ask them, what is their favorite movie and why? And our listeners might ask, why are you doing that? What's the reason? What relevance does it have? The answer is we don't have a good reason, and we just thought it would be fun. But without any further delay, Mike, what is your favorite movie and why?
Okay, so I'm going to say that I am a Gen Xer, okay? I am 51 years old. So I grew up in the best era of movies, okay? The best movies ever made were between 1970 and about 2000. So for me, as a Gen Xer growing up in that era, Star Wars was the kind of foundational movie for me. And there's lots of them. Obviously, there's 3, 6, 9. There's like 10 or 11 of them. But I think that the original movie plus Empire Strikes Back are probably my 2 favorite. There's so many great quotes in there. There's so many great lessons, I think, for life. I have found that art, history, engineering, science, all of it have great lessons for investors. And that's one of my favorite things to talk about. There are lessons in movies. There's lessons in the past. There's lessons every day walking around. And that's kind of my core belief that the things that investors need to know can come from anywhere.
Yeah, good point. I will say that The Empire Strikes Back is probably my least favorite.
Oh, interesting. Hot take.
Return of the Jedi is probably first. Lauren, just out of curiosity, what's your favorite Star Wars movie?
Yeah.
That's just mean. But admittedly, at almost 40 years old, I've never watched a Star Wars movie. So I'm going to lose some fans here, maybe even in Mike Antonelli. To have to admit that out loud. But maybe you can educate me over dinner Friday night in the ball game. So, and I have 2 little boys that maybe they just need to start seeing them, and we'll live it together.
Yeah. Well, that's serious nerd alert, Lauren. You need to watch a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, we need you in there. Yeah.
Well, to get started with maybe more insightful content, Mike, obviously a ton of news and headlines going on these days, but can you tell us what's top of mind for you?
It's a good question. There's lots of things I could say that I think might make sense, right? Things like, I don't know, tariffs, or things like wars, or things like the one big, beautiful bill, right, that just passed, which I'm sure your team is going to have to dig into quite a bit to talk to clients about what the changes are to Social Security and taxes and stuff like that. But for me, the thing that's always on the top of my mind, and I think this is important for not only advisors, but for clients, is to remember that the things that we go through every day in the market, the things that we see in the news, the things that might make you afraid, none of it's new, None of that stuff is new, okay? We go through it a lot in history. Things like the national debt, or things like the decline of the dollar, or things like inflation. The things that are often on the tops of people's minds are the things they watch on the news, just the news. But for me, the things that are on my mind are, how can we get through these moments like people did in previous moments and succeed as investors and advisors? What are the things that a guy like me and my colleagues and a team like yours needs to really know to cut through all that noise? And for me, we can dig into this a little bit. The tariffs and the politics and the kind of the changes to the tax code, all of it is digestible as long as we put it into perspective with history. So top of my mind right now is, how can I communicate that to clients in a really easy to understand way?
And how do you do that?
Well, it's storytelling. Like, to me, it's storytelling. And I'm going to do an event tonight on campus here in Bloomington. I'm going to tell 3 stories. I can't tell them all here because it would take about 45 minutes. But one of the stories I will tell is about the past, about how tariffs, take tariffs, for example, something that really rocked the market in April of this year. That was why it was down about 20%. Are tariffs new? Why did the stock market hate it so much? Well, if you remember, there were all sorts of moments in history that we've done tariffs before. In 1897, a man named William McKinley, who was a Republican, implemented tariffs in the United States of America with a Republican Congress 5 months into his presidency. Okay, 1897. Donald Trump, 1, 2, 3, just did the same thing. But back then, the tariffs were rolled back. The market understood that it wasn't going to work. And now the stock market's at an all-time high today. Why? For the very same reason. The market's really good at understanding what might work and what won't work. And let me just say this, and I want everybody to remember this, okay? The stock market and the bond market are very powerful entities, very powerful throughout all of history. Why do I say that? Stock markets act as a governor on politicians. They do. If a politician proposes something, the stock market can go, nope. The bond market can go, nope. It can panic, and it can tell the politician, no, that's just not going to work. April this year, the stock market falls 20%, saying, and the bond market was saying, this level isn't going to work. And then it gets backed off, and it gets pushed out, and it gets pushed out. So remember, markets are very good at finding out what's actually going to happen. That's a powerful lesson for you. They're super. And by the way, markets are not elected. They're not partisan. They are these powerful entities that tell any party politician yes or no. So that's what is on my mind and how I've been conveying it to clients recently.
Do you have any insights on Senator Palpatine and his thoughts on tariffs?
So Palpatine, if everybody hasn't seen Star Wars, just kind of seizes power and just kind of removes democracy completely. That's not the case here. But I will say this. In my role, I talk to a lot of clients, okay? I talk to clients who are Democrats. I talk to clients who are Republicans, okay? Both sides. And I have decided, and I have found out, that for the rest of my career, I'm just going to bounce between the two parties, right? Whoever's in power, whoever's not in power. That's just going to be the rest of my career. It's probably your career. And so for the longest time, I've had people come up to me and say, are we going into a dictatorship? Like that's a question I've gotten. Palpatine was a dictatorship. And it's just, all the stuff is born out of just political fear, experience, parties, all that stuff that investors have to deal with on a daily basis. But for the previous 4 years, I was talking with people who were like, are we turning into a socialist nation? They're just two sides of the same coin, right? They're just two sides of the same coin. Somebody worried that their view of the world isn't really evolving right now, and then it flips to the other party or the other person. But the stock market continues to do what it does. We're going to talk about that. And it continues to reward investors who can ignore that kind of partisan nonsense. So,
Mike, something that kind of resonated with me and obviously does with you, you sent us some presentation materials that you've been using with clients recently, and you included a quote, which I thought was interesting. It's a quote from the book Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. The quote is, as sure as time, history is repeating itself, and as sure as man, history is the last place he'll look for his lessons. Can you tell us why you think this quote is meaningful and how it applies to your approach to markets, the economy, and investing?
It's crazy, right? Like I said, nothing's new, okay, in our lives. Nothing's new. Elections, politicians, tax bills, pandemics, wars, inflation, bear markets, bull markets, nothing's new. We just go through this cycle. But for some strange reason, mankind, men and women, all of us, we can't seem to learn the lessons that have just come behind us, that are just in the past. Like tariffs. We've done tariffs before. They haven't worked. They get rolled back. We try them again. Okay, we're just going through the same stuff over and over again. We stimulate the economy with a bunch of money. It causes inflation to rise. We have to back it off. We keep doing the same things over and over again. But let me say this, and this is crucial, okay? I believe, and I'm sure this team probably believes the same thing, that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. I deeply believe that to be true. Think about yourself and how you acted in April of this year, or how you acted in 2022, or how you acted in 2018, or how you acted in 2020. The times when the market was really, really difficult and you were scared, and you're on the phone with the team saying, maybe I want to sell, or I can't take this pain anymore. We don't look into the past for our lessons. We seem to forget what we just learned. If you sold in 2022, maybe you also sold in 2020. Maybe you also sold in 2018. Maybe you also sold. The stock market's at an all-time high today, right now, which means that every single difficult moment of the past has been moved on from the market, right? I don't understand why people don't look into their past behavior and be like, maybe I was a little panicky. Maybe I made a mistake. I'm a human being. I make mistakes. We don't tend to learn from our mistakes. And I think it's because we're just emotional creatures. And sometimes fear just makes us make bad decisions. And I think that that's why having a good relationship with a team like this, an advisor, is so crucial to success, because what's between your ears, this thing that we have between our ears, kind of fights against us the whole time. And we refuse to look into the past for our own lessons.
Mike, I had a question for you related to, and basically you can relate to this to history, or you can look at current conditions. And one of the things that we've seen are these small wars that are happening with Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Israel, Iran. And we are not seeing a lot of market change related to these issues. And I guess we've also gone through historically at how long we've had relative peace for the world, relative.
Yeah.
As far as the number of people fighting, because if you look back historically, what lessons can we learn from the stock market about how people should view these things? The next thing that pops up, do you have any stories to tell on how people should look at those types of events?
Let me do one, and I'm going to see if you guys are history buffs. What do you think was the moment in time where the United States of America, let's say the world, was most at risk for nuclear annihilation? What was that moment?
Cuban Missile Crisis.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. Great. History buff in here. The Cuban Missile Crisis was probably the moment that the world was at most risk of nuclear annihilation. Probably the scariest moment in history between two nuclear superpowers. Okay, that was early 60s, right? The stock market fell about 3% during the Cuban Missile Crisis. 3. And then by the end of the year, it was back to an all-time high. So the scariest moment in the history of probably the world for nuclear annihilation, and the stock market didn't really blip all that much. Why is that? Well, here's the answer, my friends. And it's something I want you to think about as you see a war pop up in the Middle East, or as you see Ukraine and Russia fight, or as you see some sort of kind of global conflict. Ask yourself this: how does it affect the earnings and profits of the 500 largest companies in the United States of America? Ask yourself that question. Then ask yourself this question: will the people that work at those companies still go to work the next day and try to create products and solutions and profits, and the shareholders of those companies get to profit from those? Nobody skipped work because Russia invested in the United States. Okay, nobody skipped work going to their jobs and continue to be a productive member of the economy because of Israel and Iran, or because of Ukraine and Russia. They are dangerous events. They are destabilizing for the world and peace and all those things, but they don't affect the profits of Walmart and Procter and Gamble and Starbucks and Costco. That's what you're invested in. You're actually invested in people going to work every day at Eli Lilly. Okay, you're investing in people going to work at Eli Lilly and making profits that you get to participate in. So global conflicts, they cause angst in our minds and in the world, and we talk about it a lot. But the most dangerous moment in history really didn't impact the stock market all that much. You have to remember that the stock market doesn't move on global conflicts. It moves on the profits of the companies of the United States economy.
Yeah, Mike, I completely agree with that point. Something I often point out is humans are very emotional beings. The market has an incredible ability to remove those emotions. And it sounds insensitive for us as human beings to talk about global conflict and, market deterioration, loss of net worth, and not insert that human emotion and that element to it. So the market does it for us. It's just us as humans acknowledging that we're emotional and not letting that drive our decision making around our finances.
I don't want to. I don't want to seem like I'm shoulder shrugging people dying abroad. I'm not trying to. I have as much empathy for the people in war torn areas as anybody. When I think about the stock market and helping clients make money, which is I think one of our primary goals here, right? Helping our clients to make money, reach goals, develop their purpose in life. In order to do that, sometimes we have to remind them why the stock market does what it does and how it does what it does. And I think my secret sauce, I really do, is doing this in an understandable way so that when people, Baird clients, your clients, all the Baird clients, hear me speak, they go, I get it. I understand what he said. It's not too complicated. He's not up there talking about earnings estimates. I think that's important. And venues like these are good because it lets me express my personality and my beliefs. Let me just say this. I'm going to give you another lesson. There's going to be a lot of lessons in here. The stock market on a daily basis, okay, only asks itself one question. That's all it asks itself. On a minute-by-minute basis, it asks itself this. Are things getting better, worse, or staying the same? That's all the stock market does on a day-to-day basis. Are things getting better, worse, or staying the same in the U.S. economy and companies? Are things getting better, worse, or staying the same? That's it. That's all it asks itself. In April, it was getting worse. Tariffs, global trade, worse, worse, worse. Then President Trump backs it off. Oh, that's better. Okay. Then the Federal Reserve comes out and says, maybe we might cut rates. That's better. One big, beautiful bill comes out, tax cuts, all that stuff. Oh, that's better. That's why the stock market's going up. Things are getting better, not worse. But now it might start saying same, right? If nothing new happens, then it's just like same. And maybe it goes nowhere. That's what's happening.
I think another challenge that's developed over the last 20 or 30 years with the rise of the internet, the news cycle, for us as human beings is that, we have access quickly to so much more information. We can get updated news faster than it took the Millennium Falcon to do the Kessel Run, which is 12
parsecs. Yeah.
By the way, I think I forgot to mention at the outset of this episode 2, which we'll now refer to as the Attack of the Clones episode, that the part of the challenge for us as hosts, which we know Lauren's going to be pretty bad at in this episode, is that we have to try to work in quotes from our guest's favorite movie naturally into the episode. So my apologies for neglecting to mention that. But
wait, can I do what? Because I have a favorite quote too. I'm gonna when you're done with your question, I'm gonna use it.
I don't have a question. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I want to just laser in on something you said. Okay, something you said about the news and access to the news. This is important, super important. Here's my quote. Okay, it's from The Last Jedi, which isn't one of my favorite Star Wars movies. Lauren's so lost. Lauren, it's okay. I'm gonna catch you up on Friday. We're gonna do this. The quote says, "The greatest teacher failure is." That's the quote. And it's said in somebody who was trying to teach somebody else something. And the quote was just like, the greatest teacher failure is. I am convinced, and you guys let me know if you believe this is also true. I am convinced that the investors that tend to fail the most are the ones that consume a lot of news. I think I'm convinced of that. The investors that tend to fail the most consume an inordinate amount of news because the news exists to make you keep watching. And the only way to keep you watching is to make you afraid. That's the whole goal of news. It's inform you, but to really keep you watching, keep you kind of pessimistic, keep you kind of scared. Everybody always asks themselves what can go wrong with their investing, what can go wrong with the market, what can go wrong in the economy. Very few people ask themselves what can go right. Like what can actually go right here? And the best investors are the ones that do that say, God, the world is crazy, but what can actually go right? What if a company in Indiana developed a drug that all of a sudden really helped people with weight loss? What could go right there? What could happen if Eli Lilly's scientists come up with a drug that not only helps people lose weight, but also helps to cure addiction? And all of a sudden, an Indiana company is making incredible profits and succeeding in helping their stock market investors reach their goals and stuff like that. What can go right? So the greatest teacher failure is, I think if you're an investor who really struggles, and you've looked into your past and you're like, I kind of messed up a few times. A simple solution, I think, is to watch less news. I think that's the lesson.
Yeah, there's actually a really interesting chart that I've had produced a couple of times. It's an overlay of CNBC viewership and Google searches of market volatility. So when CNBC viewership skyrockets, everybody's watching and searching about markets. And there is a financial incentive for the news networks to increase that viewership for advertising revenues and things. So it's a very interesting, when markets are good and things aren't volatile, people are going on vacation and they're not watching CNBC or the news. And so it's a bit perverse in the sense that they're incentivized by creating that anxiety and fear within all of us. So I agree with your point.
There's a great chart. Well, maybe you guys can find it one day and put it in a newsletter. Every time the market goes into a really difficult period, CNBC does something called Markets in Turmoil. They do a show called Markets in Turmoil. So they'll do it like stock market's down like 2 or 3% in a day or like 10% in a week. And somebody did a chart of the 1 year return after every single episode of Markets in Turmoil. So they said, where was the market 1 year later? It has 100% positive rate. So 1 year later, the market's been positive 100% of the time that CNBC has done a Markets in Turmoil episode, which is crazy. Past performance don't guarantee a future results, but that's what the data shows.
So my understanding is that there's a really old fella in the Star Wars series named Yoda. I would assume Yoda is on Social Security in his world.
I think Yoda actually himself could bankrupt Social Security with how many years he's been collecting.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope he waited until age 70, right? Hope he waited until like a lot of our clients are retirees or fast approaching retirement. And, the news, especially recently, has talked about, the projections are it's going to run out sooner than later and things. It's a topic that often comes up. What are your thoughts on Yoda continuing to get that check?
Hey, this is a great question. You did really good, Lauren. I'm actually like that. That was. I think he's like 700 years old. So this is really, really good. I will just mention, and this team will delve further into it. Baird will delve further into it. In the one big beautiful bill, there is a Social Security. I believe you get a deduction. I don't know the exact numbers, but I believe there will be some deduction that was in that bill. This team will get that information to you. But I often hear, and as you do, and some clients do, that Social Security will run out of money. Here's my take. Okay, Mike Antonelli's take. Two things. Number one, they would never cut Social Security benefits because the minute a politician cut Social Security benefits, they would be voted out of power, and then somebody would be voted in power that would restore them. Right? That's so like the notion of cutting benefits is not politically viable. It just is not. Remember that Social Security is what's called a pay-go system, which means that people like me and everybody on this call are paying into it and retirees are taking out of it, okay? Here's what percentage of benefits are paid for by our payroll taxes. It's about 90. 90% of benefits that go to retirees is paid for from just the taxes that everybody on this call are currently paying. So 90%. So if this trust fund was at zero, 90% of the taxes, 90% would still be just our payroll. What about this trust fund? It's really just an accounting mechanism. Like, let's say it goes to zero. Are they really going to cut benefits instead of just refilling it? Because let's remember, the United States of America prints its own currency. So in order for us to say that we don't want to pay Social Security benefits because it ran out, we'd have to have an entire political class say, we're not going to refill it by just printing our own currency. Would that cause inflation? Maybe, sure. But inflation's a different problem than cutting the benefits of retirees who would vote you out of power. I think that's the most pragmatic way to look at it, in that we print our own currency. We'd have to make an intentional policy to not pay 100% of benefits. And I just do not think that's politically viable. So to me, worries about Social Security running out of money are another one of those kind of like made up fears. That's my view.
You definitely hit the bullseye there, Mike. And that's kind of like I used to do with Womp Rats back home.
That's so good. That's a Star Wars quote. That's from the original movie. That's a good one.
I missed that one. I was going to say, Dan, what do you think Yoda would say about this? I know you quote this a lot.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Oh, wow.
This is great.
Well, I'll continue on my nerddom here and say, in the big, beautiful tax bill that was recently passed, it's a $6,000 amount for anybody 65 or older. And that is one of the temporary provisions within the big, beautiful tax bill. Some are made permanent. And this one, since they weren't able to get Social Security to where it was no longer taxed, they did put in a $6,000 deduction for people at 65. I think it's for 3 or 4 years, but it's not permanent.
Yeah. And I think it's per person, too. So I think if you're married, that's 12.
Right.
I think it's per person.
I do also think there's an income component to that. So
there is.
We do have a good summary we can send to anybody who's interested. But that's a very good point, Lauren. So thank you for bringing that up. Mike, to your point about, what could go right, because as we all know, and our clients are well aware, there's risk at any given time that things could go wrong in the world, that geopolitical tension could escalate. But looking forward, what could go right? Another data point that, Mike, you had included on a recent chart you sent to us talked about some potential tailwinds or boosts for markets in the economy looking forward, which included AI, artificial intelligence. We covered that in pretty good depth on our most recent episode with Ross Mayfield in terms of AI. But you also included a map of the United States showing large corporations in each state, and something you had labeled as an insane stat about U.S. household consumption going back, I think, to 1947. So can you go through that data with us and talk about how you think those factors could provide a potential boost?
So there's something I've learned, and I'm sure everybody else has learned on this call, something about Americans in particular. And what you should know and learn and remember is that Americans are really good at spending money. That is what we do. We are consumers. We run the biggest economy in the world, and it's a consumption-based economy. It's not based on manufacturing or farming, or it's a consumption-based economy. The stat going all the way back to World War II. So let's just break down consumption into two different parts. Okay, you can buy goods or you can buy services. Okay, goods are washing machines and cars and houses. Those are goods. You can buy services. You can go to hotels, professional services like wealth management, vacations or services. Okay, two different components. Services is a massive one. Services, right? Not goods, the services component. So the stat was going all the way back to the end of World War II. Consumption for services has only fallen in back-to-back quarters. So like quarter one and quarter two, quarter three and quarter four. So going all the way back to World War II, that consumption of services by Americans has only fallen in back-to-back quarters 4 times. 4. Back to World War II. One of those was COVID, right? We couldn't buy services. We couldn't leave our homes, right? That was one of them. One of the 4 going back to World War II. So the tailwind is this. Americans spend money. That's what we do. We make money. We're entrepreneurs. We work hard. We spend money. This spending money generates economic growth, generates profits for companies. The map that I have that I show clients, I'll show it tonight at the event, is the largest companies in each state. And I go to a lot of states, so I like to name it. Does anybody know what it is for Indiana? We've mentioned it already. The largest public company in the state of Indiana is Eli Lilly. And I mentioned the drugs and the tailwind are people spending money on the stuff these companies are producing. In Colorado, it's Chipotle. In California, it's Apple. In Oregon, it's Nike. I mean, in Wisconsin, it's this company called Johnson Controls, which is like a business, electronics business. But the point is this. The tailwinds of the U.S. economy are people making money, spending money, these companies producing products and services that people want. And they do that regardless of who's in power, regardless of who sits in the White House, regardless of what Congress is, regardless of what wars are happening. Chipotle will still sell burritos, okay? Starbucks will still sell coffee. And you get to benefit from it as an investor. Does that mean the stock market always goes up? No, it does not. The stock market also goes down. We've seen it lots of times in history. Why? Because all of a sudden people start to buy less of those things. Less coffee, less burritos, less GLP drugs. But it's ups and downs. It's ups and downs. That's always how it's been throughout history. But the biggest tailwind is the fact that U.S. consumers love to buy things.
What's the biggest company on Tatooine?
I think it's probably that cantina. That cantina probably makes a lot of GDP growth on that cantina is probably super, super high.
Dan and I were just saying we wish we could pipe in that song from that band that plays in that bar. It was pretty awesome.
Maybe tonight for the event, I'll see if I can work that in somehow.
Well, you touched on the fact that, yes, the market goes down at times. As we all know, there's risk involved. It's a normal but uncomfortable part of the long-term investing and saving process. And another quote that I know you cite often is from Carl Richards, who's a New York Times columnist who focuses heavily on behavioral finance, psychology, and emotion in the planning process. He's also known as the sketch guy, as he uses simple illustrations to make some of his most interesting points. But his quote that you reference often is, risk is what's left when you think you've thought of everything. So why is that so important to you? And why do you reference that quote so often?
Let me ask you a question. Don't answer, but just think in your heads. You at home watching, just think in your head too. What were the 3 biggest events of the last 25 years? What were the 3 biggest world-changing events in the last 25 years in the United States of America, the stock market, economy, the whole thing? What were the 3 biggest going back to the year 2000? Okay, I'll give you, we'll do a Jeopardy. Okay, here they are. The 3 biggest. The first one was in 2020, COVID. That was one of the world's biggest changing events. Let's go back further. Let's go back to 2008. A housing crisis, a financial crisis that brought the U.S. economy on the brink of ruin, basically. One of the worst crises since the Great Depression. And then let's go back to the year 2001. Let's go back to the fall when 9/11 happened. Okay? Those are the 3 biggest, probably risks to your money in the past 25 years. Was any one of those 3 in a strategist report in January of that year? The answer is no. Nobody had COVID in 2020. Nobody had 9/11. And nobody had the severity of the financial crisis that was brewing. Those were true risks to your money. Think about COVID. What if COVID was way worse than it acted? What if 20 million people died in the United States? What if the unemployment rate now is 20% and we're in a Great Depression? Because that was a potential outcome. We were lucky it didn't, but that was a potential outcome if the virus was much, much worse than we lucked out with, essentially. That was a huge risk to your money. What takes up all of our airtime? Alice, Lauren, Dan, what takes up all of your airtime and my airtime? And what takes up all the airtime amongst kind of the angst in our clients? It's stuff like politics and the national debt and elections, inflation, wars, decline of the dollar, all these things that we talk about every single day of our lives. We talk about the national debt all the time. We talk about who's sitting in Washington all the time. We talk about partisan bickering all the time. Are those risks to your money? Because the stock market's at an all-time high right now as we speak. Are those risks? Is who sits in the White House a risk to your money? Because we're at an all-time high. We've had Democrat and Republican presidents. So the point of the quote, that risk is what's left over after you think you've thought of everything, is what I've just told you. The thing that will cause the stock market a risk to your money in the future will come out of nowhere. We won't be able to see the thing that's 9/11 or the thing that's COVID, because that's always how history's been. That's always how it's been. It's an important quote. And let me just finish with this. Let's say I could teleport 20 years into the future, okay, and come back to you guys right now. What would I have seen 20 years into the future? Well, hopefully I would have seen Caitlin Clark and the Fever growing the NBA by 100 times. Hopefully I would have seen IU, a couple national titles in basketball and football. Hopefully I would have seen the Colts. I'm really pandering here, but hopefully I would have seen a lot of good stuff. But you know what I would have also seen over that 20-year period when I came back here today? I would have seen, how many crises would I have seen? How many catastrophes? How many worries? I would have seen so much bad stuff in that 20 years. So much. Why? Because that's how it's always been. Think about how far you've come and how many catastrophes, how many crises, how many things you lived through. Real risk, true risk to your money is things that we can't see or think of or even possibly fathom. But the best way to deal with that is how you are doing it now. A team and a plan, and the plan that says, even if the world goes crazy, we got you covered. Isn't that what this team does? Isn't the point of the plan to say, if the world does turn upside down, we have a lifeboat for you to sit in? That's the answer. The answer is not, let me just wing it on my own. That's what I believe.
Yeah,
absolutely. Awesome.
Well, Mike, thank you. We can't tell you how much we appreciate your time, taking a few minutes to sit down with us and share your valuable insights. I think I speak for Dan and Lauren, and we say this in the most professional, appropriate way possible. But to paraphrase Princess Leia talking to Han Solo just before he's ensconced in carbonite, we love you.
And I know, thank you, I know.
Well, Dan, Lauren, thank you both for joining me as host today. Thanks to all our listeners for joining us for 3C Group Money Matters, a podcast for clients, colleagues, and community. You can catch Mike in the future on his Bull and Bear blog or his commentary on bairdwealth.com. You can find this episode and future episodes of 3C Money Matters on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So thanks for joining, and may the force be with you.
This broadcast contains the current opinions of the host and are subject to change. The broadcast is provided for informational purposes only, is not a complete analysis of every material fact regarding any company, industry, or security, and should not be considered investment advice or recommendations. Investors should obtain professional advice before making investment decisions. The information has been obtained from sources considered reliable, but its accuracy is not guaranteed. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and diversification does not ensure a profit or protect against loss. All investments carry some level of risk, including loss of principal. Baird is not a legal or tax services provider, and you are strongly encouraged to seek the advice of the appropriate professional advisors before taking any action. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of a fund carefully before investing. This and other information is found in the prospectus and summary prospectus. For a prospectus, please contact your financial professional and read it carefully before investing. This broadcast may not be reproduced without express permission of Robert W. Baird & Company Incorporated, member SIPC.